Hello everyone, Matt from Model Minutes here and welcome back to the workbench for another unboxing. This week we're looking at the vintage classic Brewster Buffalo in 1/72 scale from Airfix. So join me as I take a look inside the box and see what this one is like. So starting off on the outside, we've got the nostalgic image as drawn by Roy Cross of the Brewster Buffalo in combat in Burma or somewhere like that. This poor guy has taken a few hits on his tail there, but he's still putting up a bit of a fight. Down here, bottom right, tells us it's 1/72 scale, and we've got an item code of A02050V, V for vintage. So flipping onto the thin edge, we've got some information about the kit and the aircraft. So this one tells us that the mold tools were made in 1972 and the illustration by Roy Cross in the same year. So 1972, not necessarily the oldest kit in the Airfix vintage range, but still old enough to justify its place there. We do, however, have two different paint schemes. We've got one from Burma as part of the Royal Air Force, and I find it quite interesting that even though it's 1942, they're using the sort of Battle of Britain colours, the paint scheme that was used at the Battle of Britain. So if you've got Spitfires, Hurricanes, that sort of thing, this is the perfect kit for you because you can just use the same paints that you used on those. Alternatively, we've got a Brewster Buffalo as used by the US Navy on the USS Lexington, but this is silver, blue and yellow. I think it's actually got two different shades of yellow. The length of the aircraft is 108mm when it's built, 148 in its width, and it has 42 parts. On the right hand side here, we've got the Humbrol paint colour callouts and also 1 flying hour. That's a coupon. Cut it out and keep it. If you're a member of the club, you can redeem for more kits using them. Alternatively, send them to Models for Heroes. It is a skill level 1, which implies that it should be an easy kit to build. That remains to be seen. On the other thin edge, we've got warnings in various languages. We've got a copyright and tooling date. So as mentioned, 1972 is our tooling date and 2023 is our copyright date or release date of this particular version. And we've got a Cartograph logo down the bottom, which tells us that this should have Cartograph decals, and Cartograph makes some of the best transfers out there. So I don't anticipate there being any problems with those. Brewster Buffalo, same information on the thin edges as on the front. So let's get inside the box and see what we're met with. Let's move the bag to one side and look at the instructions. Hopefully there's some transfers in there somewhere. There's the transfers, I'll put them to one side. So starting off on the instructions, you've got the information on the front there about the actual aircraft and some tips down the bottom about preparing your kit for building. It's not an A4 booklet, it's like a big sheet and it just folds out. But it only has 1 page of building instructions. Perhaps a little bit cluttered, but these are based off of the original vintage instructions from some time ago. So let's take a look at what's going on here. We've got a pilot, which is always nice to have. And this pilot is being added into his chair and then onto the floor of the cockpit. That pretty much sums up the internal cockpit details. There doesn't seem to be much else. We do have a clear part though for the floor of the cockpit. The Buffalo did have a clear cockpit floor so the pilot could see the ground beneath him. Step number 2, we can add our fuselage halves together. The tail surfaces, the arrestor hook. I presume if you're doing the RAF version, you don't need the arrestor hook because it wasn't operating off of a carrier, but someone let me know in the comments. If you are doing the naval version, you can put this telescope gun sight. They weren't very popular and they weren't used throughout the war. Moving on down to step number 3, we can add our cockpit canopy. It comes in 3 parts, and depending on which version again you're doing, you'll either want part 16 or part 15. If you're doing the RAF version, which I probably will, it'll be part 16 because it doesn't make allowance for that telescope gun sight. And then step number 4, we assemble our engine. There's quite a lot going on here. We have an engine component which gets glued inside of the front of the engine cowling and 2 cowling parts which sandwich it, and the prop goes through all of that and gets glued to a retaining pin at the back. So it looks like they've designed this to freely rotate, but again remains to be seen with these vintage classic kits. And we've got an aerial mast as well right on the nose. And then step number 5, the final step, we are adding our landing gear. It doesn't make any indication that you can have the landing gear in the raised position. However, I imagine that wouldn't be too difficult to do. It would just mean gluing it like against the wall of the aircraft rather than having it sticking down. I'd say remove the supporting legs 32 and 29 and then just glue that straight in that position there. But who knows? It does look like it had the provision for a display stand back in the day, so there's a little cutout there, so I imagine that was the option. Depending on which version you're doing, you have a choice of tail wheel. So again, I'm probably going to be doing A, and the wheels are designed not to be glued in. Instead, they're held in by the hubs, which gives this aircraft a bit of play value. So if you do it correctly, you could roll it along the floor and have the wheels turn. But I'm not really fussed about that, so I will just glue those in place. And then the painting instructions. So these are printed in full color, which is fantastic. We love to see full color painting instructions. And this is for an RAF aircraft in 1942 in Burma. And like I said, it just uses the Battle of Britain paint scheme. So dark earth, dark green, and a sky type S for the bottom. Possibly the version I'm going to do because I have loads of that paint lying around. And also because I think it just looks really interesting to have effectively an American aircraft but in RAF colours. Moving on down then, and scheme B is for the one from USS Lexington, a more complicated paint scheme. Generally overall silver, but the upper wings are yellow, the nose is blue, and the tail surfaces are a lemon colour, so it's not the same yellow as used on the wings. Lower side, we swap back out to a silver again for the lower wings. And then the props are painted in blue with these funny two-tone tips. They come as transfers by the looks of it, so you won't need to worry about that. Whereas on the RF version, you got to paint a 1.4mm yellow tip. But yeah, I'm probably going to do the RF version. Let me know which version I should do in the comments below, and then I will probably just ignore them and do my own thing anyway. So that was the instructions. Let's look at the decals. Decals come on this small sheet and printed by Cartograph. They are absolutely fantastic. Look at that. And they look lovely. So we've got the yellow, that's not yellow, that's blue. We've got the blue bands for the naval version from the, what's it called? US Navy, there you go. And the insignia for those. And then we've got the RAF version up here, and some common details as well. And they look to be very well reproduced. The transfer film isn't overly thick. The registration on those circles, the red dots are right in the middle. No tears, no blemishes, nothing that I can see that is bad about these. Yeah, they should go onto the aircraft really nicely. So, the main event, the bag of bits. Let's get this open and see what we've got. We have some very dark grey plastic. And if you've been keeping up with Airfix recently, you'll know that I think they swapped their plastic out. They've got a slightly different blend now. So the dark grey is the more modern plastic that they're going to be using. So you should see more dark grey plastic. The only problem with the dark grey plastic is it blends in with my desk because it's almost the same colour. But what have we got? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I'm not going to call them sprues or frames because they're not really, are they? They're just sort of holding the pieces together. Like we don't really need that bit because it's just your lower wing. So we will just put them to the side and have a quick look at the clear parts. And actually, they're not bad. They look all right. There is a little bit of flash, which is to be expected. There are some scuff marks on the naval version of the windscreen. The RF windscreen looks a little bit better quality-wise. There are some scuffs on the insides here. Flash is minimal. There is a bit. There is some tidying up that's going to be needed. But on the whole, these parts are pretty clear. They're pretty good looking parts. Canopy frames are raised. Yep. So it shouldn't be too difficult to paint these. The parts do feel a little greasy, so they may benefit from a wash before you end up doing this kit. But on the whole, they look all right. This little sprue then, this is our upper wing half, and we have a lot of raised rivets. Lots and lots of raised rivets, as was the style at the time. And that's not too bad. They don't look too bad. It looks like a fairly good representation. Naturally, nowadays, people prefer recess because they hold washes and things much better. But we've got a copyright Airfix product limited there. There would have been a date on the inside, but that's been crossed out or removed. We do have the bottom surfaces here as well, so the other wing half will press into that, which is here. And again, it's the same deal, same sort of situation, raised rivets and panel lines. Mold quality is generally okay. Plastic is very flexible. Look at that. That's quite flexible plastic. Not necessarily a bad thing, because it will mean that you've got a bit more of play when you come to assemble this. Flash isn't that noticeable. Fuselage half then. This is a very small kit, isn't it? It's a very dinky little model. Again, a bit of flex in the plastic there. A few little scuff marks as well. Don't know if they'll show up on my camera, but there's a few little scuff marks there. Perhaps where the tool's not being particularly well looked after, but not too bad. Internally, no internal detail, but that was the style at the time. Ejector pin marks are quite heavy on the inside, but nothing particularly noticeable on the outside. Onto this little frame then, the other half of the fuselage is the same kind of deal, but we do also have our tail surfaces, which are of the same ilk. A little bit of recessed detail there, the lines marking out the control surfaces. And then as we come down to the smaller parts, that's where we start to see the flash. The flash is starting to appear on the smaller parts, particularly on the arrestor hook and the landing gear legs. The wheels have got some flash around them. There may be ever so slightly a touch of mold misalignment as well. It's slightly off center, but that's not bad. You can manage that with a bit of sanding. And we have our engine component, which doesn't look too bad. And then we have our pilot. And the pilot, there he is, get him in focus. The pilot is, let's flip him around so he's not on his head, the generic pilot, it would seem, of that era. So generally quite a good sculpt for the time. But you would see this pilot in virtually every single kit that Airfix manufactured, probably since the 60s or so. But still not a bad looking figure for that age. A bit of flash, bit of tidying up needed, but yeah, good. And then finally, the very last sprue, frame, plastic parts, we've got our propeller, which is, it seems a little bit thin. It's actually a little bit warped. I guess the plastic was still a bit warm when it came out. Might need bending back. The blades have twisted up. As you can see, get that on the screen. They've twisted up a little bit. But if anything, we can probably manage that. A little bit of an ejector pin here, which will need cleaning up on the spinner. And moving on down. Parts are all there. There's no short shots, but there is a little bit of flash. But it is what, 1974 tooling? Just confirm that. 1972 tooling. So yeah, not that bad. Could build up into a very reasonable representation, but would be a fun kit to do as a back to basics build. So when I do a back to basics build, I like to do them as you know, how I did them as kids. So I would even be tempted to do this with enamels. That would be fun. Maybe build it up, get a primer down, and then just build it with paint it with enamels. Would take a bit longer to do because enamels have a massive drying time. But yeah, let me know in the comments if that's something you'd be interested in, a back to basics build of the Brewster Buffalo. Try saying that after a few. So we had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 frame parts, bits, lumps of plastic, which have raised rivet detail. Mold quality is generally okay. A little bit of flash in places. The new plastic is a little bit oily, but, you know, it's manageable. We had 1 line of clear parts, which seemed to be pretty good, despite their age. instruction sheet, which seems to be reasonably easy to follow. There are paint colour callouts on here. It's a little bit cluttered, but it's based off of the old ones. So the Vintage Classics range can be a bit harder to build because they are a little bit older and they're not as logical in their layout of things, but yeah, manageable. And then we have our two painting instructions and decal placement sheets, which are printed in colour, which we love. We love seeing stuff printed in colour because it just makes it less ambiguous, and I'm gonna go for that one. I already did a Buffalo in this sort of paint scheme from Hobby Boss, so if you want to take a look at that, I think there's a good video of that somewhere on my channel. And we also had a sheet of transfers, which are beautiful. Cartograph, absolutely fantastic. However, I think it's worth remembering that the transfers sometimes cost as much as the plastic parts that go inside the box. And that's what you're paying for. You're paying for quality transfers with these kits. All of which comes contained within a very nice looking box with that traditional Roy Cross artwork, which we all love. So let's wrap this one up. How much would you be looking at spending on this kit as it stands at the moment on the Airfix website recommended retail price? Well, that'll be £10.99. You might think that is perhaps a little high. Maybe it should be £7 or £8. But some of the Vintage Classic kits that only come with one paint scheme, they are obviously a bit cheaper. So you've got the option of two, and I think that's what we're paying for in this kit, is that choice. The parts as well are a little bit better than some of the other Vintage Classics that I've seen, particularly I think if we remember the Fiat G50. This is a considerably better model. I think even the Boomerang wasn't as nice as this one looks. So this one's okay. I look forward to building this one. And as we've mentioned, this was originally tooled back in 1972. It's been in the Airfix range since then a number of times. I actually remember it being in the range back in 2008, and I wanted one, but I never had the chance to get one, which was a shame. But now I do. So, yay. Let me know down in the comments if you agree with my assessment of this kit and if you thought my review was fair. Additionally, let me know any other topics you'd like me to cover on my channel. As always, a quick shout out to my channel members and patrons for the massive support they give the channel. Massive thanks to these guys on screen. To find out how to join them and to find out more about what becoming a patron or channel member means, take a look at the links in the description. In the description, you'll find other ways to help support the channel, but the best way to support the channel for free is by subscribing with notifications turned on so you never miss a modelling upload. Finally, though, the last thing to say is a massive thank you to you for watching this one, and I'll see you on the workbench again next time.